evening and welcome to all of you and to all of you who are live streaming with us. Folks here who are still enjoying their meal, this is a Jewish institution, and therefore if we tried to make you stop eating, we would have to close our doors forever. So please do continue to enjoy, and if you are joining us from afar, feel free to snack as well. We won't tell anyone. It is my very, very great pleasure this evening to be joined by these three tremendous panelists who are going to share some of their genius with us tonight. Michael Ellsberg is the best-selling author of The Education of Millionaires, Everything You Don't Learn in College About How to Be Successful, The Power of Eye Contact, Your Secret for Success in Business, Love, and Life, and of the upcoming You Are the Best Investment. Michael has spent many years interviewing and learning from the world's most successful people, mostly millionaires and billionaires. If you need a loan, talk to Michael, who didn't complete college but instead educated themselves in the real world of business. Michael is himself an education reform expert and entrepreneur, and he is a popular media commentator and lecturer, and is currently one of the most sought-after young thinkers and speakers in the world. As if that weren't enough, Dayenu, we also have joining us Esther Perel. Esther Perel is a psychotherapist, author, and regular media commentator who is changing the conversation on what it means to be in love and have a fulfilling sex life. You are allowed to take notes. A licensed marriage and family therapist, Esther travels the world working across cultures, coaching and consulting organizations and family, and speaking regularly on erotic intelligence, trauma, hopefully those two things don't go together, conflict resolution, and infidelity. Esther also maintains a private psychotherapy practice here in New York. Her best-selling and award-winning book, Mating in Captivity, has been translated into 24 languages, so it probably doesn't hurt that Esther speaks 9. Esther's Valentine's Day 2013 TED Talk, The Secret to Desire in a Long-Term Relationship, generated more than 1 million hits in its first month and millions more ever since. And we have also Dr. Gail Saltz with us tonight. Dr. Saltz is a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the New York Presbyterian Hospital, a psychoanalyst with the New York Psychoanalytic Institute, and best-selling author of the critically acclaimed Becoming Real, Defeating the Stories We Tell Ourselves That Hold Us Back, Anatomy of a Secret Life, The Psychology of Living a Lie and the Ripple Effect, and How Better Sex Can Lead to a Better Life. She is also a television commentator, NBC Today Show mental health contributor, and emotional wellness contributing editor for Health Magazine. And in addition, Gail is a year-round presence here at 92Y, hosting a number of engaging programs and series, including Strength of Mind, where she interviews celebrities and extraordinary individuals about a range of psychologically interesting issues, as well as psychobiography, in which she invites experts and brings her own expertise to bear on examining the mysterious inner lives of people who have shaped history. Gail has been called by Tom Brokaw a voice of wisdom and insight in a world of confusion and contradictions. And we are all very fortunate that we are about to learn firsthand why. Just a programming note, John Travolta was supposed to be here this evening to do this introduction, and so I feel that in order to honor him, that I'd like you all to join me now in offering a warm welcome to Marcel Edbrards, Elise Parkim, and Grant Stans. So, let's talk. Michael, we're we're going to start with you because tonight, this focus on what we're calling spiritual genius really stems from, quite literally, the beginning, the creation story in the Bible, where we learn that God breathed the breath of life into Adam, into the first human being. And that breath, nishima, is also connected to the word nishama, soul. And so everything about us, our very life's breath, has come from God, whom we also learn in the same creation narrative has created each and every one of us, B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. So what this means is that each and every one of us has infinite value and infinite uniqueness and infinite potential in each and every one of our lives. So, not every single one of us will be Einstein. Not every single one of us will be Moses. Not every single one of us will be Maimonides or any number of the other geniuses who have been discussed over this festival of genius. And yet, with spiritual genius, each and every one of us has the potential to make something genius out of our existence. And that's what we're going to focus on this evening. So, Michael, I'd love for you to talk a little bit, since this is about really making yourself who you are, a little bit about what it means in your experience to be self-made.
That's a great question. Almost everyone I interviewed for my book, I spent about 2 years talking to the people who are probably the most successful on the planet with the least credentials to be so. And almost all of them were told that they were a failure, a dropout, they weren't going to amount to anything. They were going to end up a janitor or flipping burgers. And they were told that in school, and then they were told that because they chose to leave school. And that probably there was a feedback loop there where part of why they chose to leave school was they were being told that so much. And every one of these people bucked that prediction. So these are people who are literally self-made. I interviewed, about half the people I interviewed were quite poor when they were growing up. The other half were from more middle-class backgrounds. I didn't interview wealthy people because that's not a story to be wealthy and remain wealthy. Is there the audio cutting in? No, okay, I'm sorry, this side of the room. For audio, I'm going to look over here more, but I haven't forgotten you. So what these people had to do was follow an inner guidance, because everything they were being told was that they were going to fail. And the only way that you can succeed when everyone around you is telling you you're going to fail is to have some spark within, some may say a divine spark or a creative spark, that you listen to. And I was just happened to be reading Walden this morning, and there's that famous line of listening to the beat of a different drummer. And that actually takes an enormous amount of courage to do that. We usually think of courage as something that is physical, and of course, often courage requires that kind of physical courage, whether it's in battle or firefighters and police officers. But just as challenging is social courage, what might be called social courage, which is to do something that many, many people are telling you is crazy, and to listen and decide whether you're going to listen to the other people or yourself. And that is a skill that is, I don't know if it's a skill so much as just a proclivity or a capacity that is essential for our topic tonight, which is creativity.
Gail, I'm wondering, in your experience, because you see the whole human experience in different parts of your work, sort of from 20,000 feet, And then you are sitting across from people in your daily practice every day for many, many years. So just building off of this idea of what it means to be able to really move forward, even when everything around you is telling you that you can't do what it is that you're trying to do. Have you seen something that ends up being that ingredient that is the difference between a person who will be able to transcend an obstacle and a person who actually will be felled by that obstacle and just never be able to get back up?
So, I mean, really what you're talking about is resilience. And, some people probably have a combination of biological factors, their temperament that lends itself more to resilience. But I also think that people have life experiences, difficult experiences that they have found their way through that enables them to build resilience and say, okay, well, I got through that horrendous time. I guess as this comes along, I'll be able to figure out how to do that as well. I think we're living in a day and age right now where many people mistakenly think that even concepts like genius or making it through, that you either can or you can't, but it should be easy. And the concept of hard work, which, if you've been to any of the other programs this week, I moderated something last night, anybody who is a genius of any sort worked incredibly hard. It didn't just drop on them. So whether we're talking about relationships or sexual lives or making it from nothing, probably, the grit and determination to work hard continually, I would say, is what I've seen as a very extremely important ingredient. And then I guess another ingredient I would say would be the capacity for delayed gratification and impulse control. Because, the things that you want, whether it's getting over a difficult hump or making something in your life richer, the marriage or the other important relationship, or applying yourself to your work in a process that's very, very gratifying to you, the ability to say to yourself, I can wait, I can do the harder thing now and wait because I'm planning for better things to come, is also, I think, very, very important. And last, I'll say, is the ability to make mistakes and forgive yourself and see the learning in the mistake, that the mistakes are necessary. Actually, there's a wonderful book, I didn't write it, called Brilliant Blunders that came out recently that is about the geniuses of our time and how most of them made some terrible mistake on the route to their brilliant discovery, and that without that mistake, they never would have made the discovery they made. And I think that's true in our personal lives as well, that the ability to take the risks, to make the mistakes, to forgive yourself the mistake, to learn from the mistake and move forward is also important.
Esther, just building off of this notion of resilience, and we will make sure that there is plenty of discussion about sex, but no, I didn't say endurance, I said resilience. One of the things that I found so profound in your work is, and that not people don't always know, is that your background has been in family systems theory. And when I've heard you speak quite personally about what you learned growing up around Holocaust survivors, and that there were two different groups of survivors who were in your midst when you were growing up. Can you talk about those two groups and the distinction between those groups?
So it's actually an interesting take because one of the things that stands out for me when I listen to both of you is that, and I'm sure it's not the way you think, it's the story that just came out, is that it's an individual perspective. I overcame, I forgive myself, I didn't believe in the system, I had the courage. And in fact, it is a bit of I think it's more of an American view on resilience as an individual story rather than a collective resilience. And since we are in a Jewish building and we are on Shabbat, we cannot talk about resilience without talking about it in a collective sense. We are, par excellence, an interdependent bunch. And I think that is very important for me in what I'm going to describe about these survivors. This is a sentence that I wrote in my book. It was literally one sentence, and now it has become something I'm often asked to describe. But a reader that read it somewhere actually said, it may not be so simple to divide it in two groups. So I'll tell you the two groups as I would imagine them. And it was the question that you also asked, Gail. Why do some people overcome their adversity and other people remain crippled by their adversity? And when I was writing about eroticism, which is basically the antidote to death, it's the capacity to maintain a sense of aliveness in the face of deadness, flatness, routine, you name it. That takes you to a whole different understanding of eroticism, way beyond sexuality. The mystical sense, this was not I didn't invent that. That's when I went back to look at survivors. I do come from Antwerp, Belgium, which is all Holocaust survivors. So I didn't have to go to school to study trauma, I watched. And they were, in my community, like two groups, but it's not like just defined as group. Two types of homes, I would say, that I would walk in. The homes that I walked in and that felt morbid, deadened, flat. Those people, they didn't die. But then there were the other homes, and those people, they had come back to life. And they were joyous. They actually were celebrating the fact that they remained. They may have lost just as many people as the others. They may have suffered even more than the others. It didn't have to do with the degree of their suffering and their adversity. It had to do with a whole bunch of things, who they were before and what happened, but a lot of it had to do with who they knew and how they connected. So I want to introduce resilience also in terms of the connection to others and our ability to draw from others and to let others give to us. Of course, in my mind, the person who can't forgive themselves when they make a mistake is also the person who won't let you tell them that it's not so terrible that they made a mistake. It kind of, one's relationship to oneself is often intertwined with how one can receive the compassion and the kindness of others. And I thought it's very interesting, because this is then what I apply to couples, is that there are couples who are not dead, and then there are couples who are alive. There are people who survive, and that's the way they go through their life. And then there are people who feel alive and vital and vibrant and erotic in that sense. And something about them knows how to create that antidote to death, that awareness that we always have, but that we need to be able to transcend in order to have the courage, the resilience, the guts, and all of those other things.
There's a Talmudic teaching that says that the way that we come to know a person, you can really know a person, is bekiso, bekaaso, bekoso, that you know a person by their pocket, right? So what's in their pocket, or maybe also how they spend money or how they value money. Bekoso, by what's in their cup. And that really we can think of also as a worldview, right? It's the glass half full or the glass half empty. And bekaaso, by the way that he gets angry. But really that has to do with our appetites, our desires, our resilience, our fortitude, how we deal with the things that we want, and how we make sure that we have what we need. And I was curious for you, Michael, in the research that you've done, the people you've interviewed. These are people who are self-made. They have become some of the wealthiest people in the world. Is there a theme that you discovered, though, about how they relate to what they finally have to put in their pocket, right? And what ends up being their definition of success? Where do those things become synonymous one with the other, and where are they actually divergent and have nothing to do with what their bank account looks like?
I'm going to try something creative here and actually tie it to our promised topic of sex, because I think there's an analogy here.
No, we like delayed gratification, remember?
So
We are making us wait.
Yeah.
I'm no
It's
expert.
foreplay.
These are the experts here, but someone who is kind of going out trying to get sex and it has it on their mind constantly is probably going to have less success than someone who focuses on, say, being charming or developing some kind of traits that are attractive in themselves other than just the desire for sex. And so the analogy back to money is Sean Parker, who is the creator of Napster and the first outside investor. He was the founding president. Gail, could I borrow that mic? Thank you so much. He was the founding president of Facebook, so he created 2 world-changing companies. And he said something to me on this topic that really resonated for me. He said that in his experience, the people who are successful as entrepreneurs aren't actually out for money. If you are out for money, you're going to kind of do deals and try to wheel and deal and get little deals here and there, and you may end up making money. But the people who make really big companies that change the world, like Facebook, has really changed the way millions and soon to be billions of people communicate and is affecting revolutions around the world, literally, is by being very passionate about wanting to solve a problem, having a certain problem is just, there's a fire. And he said the reason is that the ups and downs that happen when you're an entrepreneur are so intense that the desire for money is not going to get you through them. You'll just give up. And there has to be some other animating passion other than just enrichment. And that's a theme that I've seen again and again in the people that I've talked with.
And just sort of building on this topic of desire, Esther, how do you define desire?
To own the wanting. To own the wanting. When you own your wanting, it is profoundly an expression, a fundamental expression of our freedom. If you talk about sexuality, you can force people to have sex. You can never force them to want. It remains our fundamental sovereignty, our fundamental freedom is in desire. But desire has become a centralized principle of modern life. So in that sense, we are in a society today that constantly cultivates our wantings and then exhorts us to satisfy our wantings. And we are in the culture of desire. Desire goes hand in hand with a consumer society, though it existed separately from it as well. That's one definition. It's just, there are so many ways. The poets have tried forever to define desire. That's mine, just because it's a useful one.
Gail, do you have a different? I'm asking. I want to know.
It's sort of the reward system. I'm thinking of it a little neurologically. It's the setup of the problem that then the reward system has the solution for, is how I think of desire, really, which is not as user-friendly as your definition, which was more accessible to people. But neurologically speaking, it is that there is a want, there is a problem, there is something that needs to be satisfied. And I think that without the promise of the reward being satisfying, whether we're talking about sex or whether we're talking about getting money or gambling or alcohol or whatever we might be talking about, without the promise of that reward system being satisfied, I don't know that you can have desire.
So that is a wonderful question. For me, reward is unrelated, not as it doesn't relate at all, but desire exists completely separately from the reward system. It is an expression. You can, if you want to link it to Judaism, I think desire is much closer to kavanah, to intention, than to sipuk, than to satisfaction. But in the consumer view, yes. In the spiritual view, no. But this is a phenomenal question that I don't know. It's not a question with an answer. It's just very interesting to see how, for some, this is very much become a definition. Is linking it to the reward system, and then we can go into the neurobiology of it, and we start to talk about all the dopamines, and this takes one route. If you want a spiritual route, it has absolutely nothing to do with the satisfaction. It has to do with the focus, with the attention, with the intention, and all of that.
So all of us might say that we have desires that we make manifest, and we also have secret desires, secret yearnings. And so those could run the gamut from sexual desire, sexual yearnings that we don't necessarily want to share with others because they need to belong to us in some way. But I'm also curious to know, Gail, when you start going into the realm of secrecy, of what things in order for us to really be who we are and be true to ourselves and be genuine with the people we care about, whether it's our closest relationships or the way that we engage in our communal relationships, whatever it is. What would you consider to be a healthy cultivation of secrecy or a healthy secret, and then an unhealthy secret that's not the building block for our being, but ends up being the unraveling?
She has great questions.
Yes, it's an excellent question. It is really an excellent question. So this is what I would say to it. Secrets, shared secrets, are a currency of intimacy. You choose who you share your secrets with, and it builds a trust, right? I've shared this with you. You're going to keep my confidence, and that makes us feel closer. It makes us feel more intimate. And so I think secrets can be used that way. I think it's a good use of secrets, I guess I'll say. I think in terms of secrets that should, not be divulged, what I would say is it's very important that you not keep secrets from yourself. That self-knowledge is the most powerful thing that you can have. And that where secrets, let's say, go awry, or as you said, we all have things that we think about or urges or desires that maybe are not okay, or societally are not okay, culturally are not okay, and that the only way to decide what you want to do and what you want to be able to contain is to know your own secrets. And that when we keep secrets from ourselves, they are much more powerful, and can exert the kind of influence that causes people to at times do things that hurt them.
Michael, you focus on what you believe is sort of a secret that is coming out in society right now, which is that there's been a certain myth that the way that everybody becomes successful is by going to college and then graduating from college and then going out and getting a job. And for instance, going into a law firm and trying to make partner. And you talk about what it means to be a rainmaker. And it's a very different definition than most of us associate to when we hear that. So what's that secret that you're trying to share that really is the thing that you think is going to be the sea change in this century for how people not only fulfill their professional pursuits, but also how we become a growth society, a growth economy?
No, thank you.
I think if you do this, it goes better than
Okay.
this.
Okay, I'll try a couple of different ways. So it's actually now starting to not be so much of a secret anymore. Student debt is the thing to watch as the next big thing. We just got through one here, we all know, with the subprime mortgage crisis, and we seem to be out of the water with that one. Student debt has now surpassed credit card debt. There's about $800 billion in credit card debt and $1 trillion in student debt. And I just read from the Federal Reserve that of students who are in their repayment phase, meaning they're now graduated and are supposed to be paying their debt back, 30% of that $1 trillion is in default right now. That's a lot of money. So this is going to be less and less of a secret and less of a controversial thing as it was when I was first writing about it, that there's people who are investing in themselves in ways that aren't paying off. And you asked about the kind of the shifts that are happening here. And the big shift is that we are becoming a much more entrepreneurial economy. The idea that in the 50s, before I was around, but I've read, is that you had one career, and there was times in our nation's history when that was the idea, is you had one or maybe two careers, and now it's every couple years is a new employer and a new career. And so even people who aren't going to be entrepreneurs in a classical sense have to become very entrepreneurial with their career. And the idea of studying, say 12 years or eight years in high school and then in college to get this credential for jobs that literally might not exist when you graduate. My computer science friends tell me that the things that you study freshman year in a computer science program are outdated by your senior year. So that's the world we're living in now, and it's a very different world than the world in which our educational system and credentialing system was built. And so there has to be some thought paid to how preparing young people for adulthood, and particularly for being contributing members of society and supporting themselves and supporting a family, how that can happen in such an insanely rapidly shifting economy and world. And it's questionable to me whether this one-size-fits-all model makes sense anymore.
Earlier when we made the blessing over the wine, we said l'chaim, right, to life, except that's actually not the definition of chaim. Chaim is plural. It means lives. And what you're talking about, Michael, in the realm of work, really expands, I think, and is a great problem and a great opportunity for us throughout our lives, in every aspect of our lives, including that we have to keep figuring out as adults what it means to become an adult in our relationships, which last, if we're lucky, they last a lot longer than they might have in a different time, when maybe you would have been married for 30 years and now you could be married for 75 or 80 and go through many permutations. And so I'd be interested to know, sort of in this framework of knowing yourself and sustaining and growing relationships when the lifetime of those relationships can be much longer. How does that change really sort of the DNA of what it means to be a person in a long-term in a long-term relationship. Gail, can you speak to that first?
I'm going to suspect we're going to come from a slightly different place. Nice. So, yeah.
Good.
So, obviously the fact that simply people are living longer means that the potential for relationships is longer, but also the fact that the divorce rate is so high and people have become very desensitized to the idea of, okay, you get a divorce and, it's just not that big a deal. I think that the threshold for sticking it out, so to speak, is diminished. And more women working means that there's less fear about I have to stay in this relationship and make it work because financially I have to. And hence actually we have more women who are actually initiating divorces than previously. And what I would say is that the value, the big value to me as a professional is that no one else will share your life narrative the way your long-term partner will, your married partner. And if you have children, you add to that piece of the life narrative. No one will share that life history with you in that way. And that is invaluable in a certain kind of way. And it's not to say that you can't leave and recapture something wonderful that you value, or that it can't be so bad, and by so bad I mean have reached a level of such contempt and disdain for one another that that it's really maybe no longer salvageable. But the life narrative history that you share is something I think worth fighting for. And I say that because I think that it takes work. Again, hard work, all the time, off and on, that people go through periods of unhappiness that might not even be related to their partner, though they do assign it to their partner. They may blame their partner. They may feel, my partner's not making me happy, even though they may be going through a period of unhappiness that they will need to work on and eventually come out of, and that would have happened with or without their partner. So I think that it takes hard work on yourself. I think it takes hard work within the relationship. I think that it takes a certain amount of allowing for what I'll call the halo effect for your partner, where you accept there are things about them that you don't adore, but they sort of pale in comparison to the things that you do. And those might be shifting things. That might change over time, what you don't like and what you do like. And allowing the space for that, the space for loving what you do love and knowing that there will be ebb and flow, and being able to tolerate that. Because I think the payoff is, or remains, this ability to share something so uniquely special in that life narrative over a lifetime that if you can do those things, it is well worth it.
No, disagree.
No. No, I don't think one can disagree. One can add and look from a different lens. And I don't.
That's what I meant. I didn't mean.
I by far don't have the truth on any of this. But so much was said. It's fascinating. So if I was to kind of tie together some of the things that you both addressed. So we live in the age of transparency. And you talk about Facebook, you talk about secrets. The interesting thing is that in the age of transparency, one of the dimensions of our lives that is really taken a hit is privacy. So by definition, you polarize. It's transparency or secrecy. The idea that you can have an intimacy with yourself, that there are things that belong to you, thoughts, feelings, aspirations, experiences that you once had, and so forth. Intimacy used to be two people living together, plowing the land, raising the kids, mending the farm, creating the economic support. Intimacy was not what it has become today, into-me-see. And into-me-see then becomes me sharing with you, my beloved, my most precious assets, i.e. my internal life, my thoughts, my fears, my feelings, my aspirations, my anxieties. I share that with you. And the mandate of sharing that with you and seeing you wanting to hear it, empathizing, validating, reflecting it back to me, and all of that is at the same time what we invest in our relationships for, and one of the reasons our relationships will crumble. Because we are asking today one person to give what once an entire community used to provide. I want the same partner to do the family, the economic support, the children, the social respectability, that whole thing, and I want the same partner to be my best friend and my trusted confidant and my passionate lover to boot, and we live twice as long. And that's a given. And so, you know, and we did one more thing in this extreme makeover of committed relationships. We brought happiness down from the heavens. It used to belong for the afterlife. We brought it down. We don't divorce because we are unhappy. We divorce because we could be happier. That's a very new reality. Now, in communist Russia, 97% of divorces were initiated by women. So forever, when women had the economic independence to leave a place that felt oppressive, she left. But I think that what is going to happen for some couples, most of us today are going to have 2 or 3 relationships in our lifetime. Some of us are going to do it with the same person. And that does not come from the hard work. That comes from the creative work. It's a different work. The hard work is about getting your expectations in place and taking responsibility for your stuff and not blaming your partner and all of the beaming, the beams, the structure. The creative work is that which brings a spark to a relationship, that makes it playful, inspiring, that maintains a sense of curiosity for who is this person that's waking up next to me every day. It's the opposite of the familiarity. That's what is called the erotic, actually. You know, the other is in the realm of love and affection. This one is in the realm of what adds that other aesthetic, vibrant, thriving dimension. And that belongs to the arts and to the creative, not to the hard work. Other work. You don't work at playing. You don't work at being inspired. You don't work at being curious. It's an attitude. It's a way of being in the world. That's what sexuality is as well. So that's how I would tie some of these things together. I mean, there's so much one can say. These are fantastic questions, you know. I think the burdens of selfhood have never been heavier than today. Now, you know, we decide how much we eat. We decide how much we work. We decide how much we pray. We decide how much we play. And we decide how much we fuck. There's a lot of things that we have to decide alone. All of these things used to be part of the institution. I listen to Michael and I think, I have a 17 and a 20-year-old. I'm married 30 years or something like that. And no, I don't know between marriage and together, but I'm 30 years with the same partner. And I'm thinking, as a mom, what would I do if one of my kids doesn't want to go to college? Or would I have the guts to say, I don't need the institution to give me the sense of trust and predictability that lets me think that that narrative, that story, that if they go and do this, something good will come out of it. Because not everyone will be the entrepreneurs who made the millions. I work with them too, and I'm thinking, but would my boy be that? How can I believe that my boy will be that? Would I destroy his self-esteem if I don't believe he could be that? Would I inflate his grandiosity if I do think he would be that? What would my position be as the mother of my children, who one more institution that crumbles in front of me and one more decision that I need to make alone?
Okay, then. So Michael, let's explore for a moment. So this entrepreneurial spirit, right, is also an individual spirit. In many ways, it may even be it's maybe the hyper mythos of the American dream. Right? It's still in that same vein of if I work hard and I go to school and I do all the right things and I tick all the right boxes, then I can be successful. Being an entrepreneur is sort of it's the 2.0 of that. If I go it alone and I make my own education and I make my own way, then I will have everything that I want and dream, and I will be everything that I want and dream in life. But is there not also is there not a shadow side to the entrepreneurial creative instinct whereby I make my own universe, right? Is there not something that actually will cause us to become more disconnected in our relationships, as a society, a community, when we say being an entrepreneur and getting an education as opposed to going to school, right? That is the next chapter. That's the next frontier.
I'm going to draw on my own experience rather than my interviewees to answer that. My dream was always to be an author, be a book writer. Many people in my family are book writers. I grew up with shelves of books, and I've just always been a book person. And I poured myself into this in my 20s, and it was the focus of my attention. And actually so I've written 3 books, 2 of which were published. The first one was a kind of memoir of comedic essays that I was very fascinated by, but the publishing industry was not fascinated by it at all, and got rejected 22 times. One of the kinder rejections was from a very famous literary editor in New York who wrote to my agent and said, I'm going to pass. Unfortunately, Mr. Ellsberg's writing is not strong enough to make up for the fact that he's not a very likable person. And now, actually, there's maybe some truth to that in this writing, but I tell this story to show that this impulse to go out on your own, like you said, and to create something can often lead one down very faulty paths. I fortunately kind of got the message that the path that I was going on, that type of writing, wasn't likely to meet with an audience. And I wanted to not just write in my attic or basement or whatever it was, but to write for readers. And so there always has to be this dance between what the creative person wants to create and what the market wants. And there has to be some tension, because if you just create what the creator wants to create, you end up like I was with this awful book that even looking back I cringe at reading and that no one wanted to buy. But if you just go towards what the market wants, then you just end up with derivative drivel, essentially. There's a famous quote from Steve Jobs. Someone asked him, did you come up with, I think it was when he either came up with the iPad or the iPhone, I think it was the iPad. They said, well, did you do a bunch of market research to determine that people wanted this type of device? Did you research to find out if that's what your customers wanted? And his response was, it's not the customer's job to know what they want, it's my job. And so that to me is a brilliant interplay between these two tensions, and that he was clearly, as I said before, marching to his own drummer, but it was with a very, very keen awareness of what would be popular and what would sell. And so he somehow balanced between those two poles.
So before we're going to get to some of your questions, but as we transition into your questions, what I'd like to ask of each of you is, it seems like, just going back to something that you said, Gail, about not keeping secrets from yourself, that is there for each of you one question that you think is essential for all of us to ask ourselves in order to, it doesn't have to be the only question, but one question that each of us could ask ourselves that would give us the best chance of revealing a part of ourself to ourself that we don't yet know, but that we need to know in order to tap into that infinite potential that we've been endowed with. And I'm
I just
making
want to
you
say
go
that
first.
there would be a line around Manhattan if I could, in my office, think of that one question that would allow you to tap into. Because I spend years taking care of people trying to. So that's a very, very hard question. I think to some degree, thinking about what we're talking about, it's the dual question of what am I most afraid of, but what do I most want?
Esther?
I was completely on the same track. I can offer you two questions from the place of the work that I do, and I will put them in the context of sexuality because sexuality is the place where you can see the most archaic parts of a society and the most progressive parts of a society, and so too for families and individuals. It's a lens, and it's probably one of the most profound lenses into people. There's a reason why neshama and neshima go together. That's what happens in sexuality. You breathe to your soul. So most of the time, people think about sex as something you do. And so one of the more interesting questions that I found people, that open people is, where do you go in sex? Where do you go? What parts of you do you connect with? What do you seek to express there? Where does it take you? And related to that comes a question that's very similar to you. What are the parts of your story that you would like to hold on to? And what are the parts of your story that you would like to leave behind? You can put sexual story, relationship story, professional story. But it has to do with the two most important forces, stability and change.
One question that I find I come back to again and again in my own creative pursuits, and that when I talk to other creators seems to be valuable, is just the question, who am I without fill in the blank? Just put something in that blank that seems very central to your conception of yourself, whether it's your job or your relationship.
I was going to say, who am I without my accent?
I've started to think, who am I without writing books? That it's been such a huge part of my life, and this last project has been the most challenging one yet for a variety of reasons, and I've started to ask that, and it always reminds me of that spark of why I'm doing it, that it's ultimately not about books or any external thing. There's some inner spark that is with us so long as we're here, and that is not dependent on external factors.
Beautiful. Well, I know that our assembled community here also that you have questions for our panelists. So we're obviously not going to be able to get to all of them, but we'd love to take a few of those now. Or apparently you have answered all of life's questions. I'll repeat the question, by the way, in case you can't hear.
I heard many themes tonight, and I really appreciate what the panel has spoken to. But one that I would sort of dichotomize, if it's fair to dichotomize, is between the individual work that needs to be done, the inner work, the sort of self-made side, and the system within which we're functioning, and the connectedness, the relationship work. And you can't probably proportionalize that in some way, but I guess there is a bit of a chicken and egg piece of it. Is our primary task to start with that inner work, the self-knowledge, the self-awareness, the sense of our own journeys, or is it to become more aware of the other and the relationships and the potential of all the erotic and the desire and everything else that can be realized through speak to that in some way, either from a clinical perspective, because you're meeting with individuals and also with families, and then you're seeing successful individuals who are also part of communities and connections, and how does it all come together from where you sit? Sorry, Jeff.
Thanks, Todd. Let me just sum that up. So the connection between the individual and the communal, in which, and you'll definitely correct me if I get it wrong, I know you, but what is the interplay between the two? Must we first engage in the communal in order to develop the individual, or do we first develop the individual and that then catapults us more effectively into the relational communal?
Well, I'll go with sort of a biologic model for you here, because I always tend to move back towards science. But basically, our makeup, our genes that determine, who we're going to be and so on, are actually, we've come to understand in the last decade, are constantly changing. They're turning off and on and changing in a way who we are. And they do that based on what has happened to us from the environment. So that really, in that sense, literally, truly, biologically, we're interdependent. The environment, the community affects who we are, who we become, how we keep changing. And obviously, we as individuals make up the community. So we are constantly we are impacting our environment, and so it's a cycle. Clinically, I would say, sort of in the office, I think these things can be worked on in tandem. I think that, if you want to make your relationship better, it's hard to imagine that you don't have to look inside yourself and understand what you're bringing to it, what you're imbuing it with, and so on, and that often has to do with what has gone on in your past, and therefore the prism through which you are seeing your relationship, which may not be the reality, but it is your perception. And so doing that inner work is, I think, crucial. But I don't think that it has to necessarily happen before, or has to be done in order to be working on the relationship. That it's a dynamic system, and that you both come with your prisms that you see each other with, and that understanding that together and being able to essentially mirror that to one another, what you do understand, what you're perceiving, correcting those perceptions, et cetera, enhances the relationship. That's what I would say.
So I would say, in the presence of the other, you discover yourself. You can take a biological lens, you can take a phenomenological lens, but we're going to say the same thing. I can give it to you, as Gail was talking, I was thinking, so I am primarily a couples therapist, but I still see individuals. And what doesn't cease to baffle me is when I've met a person alone for a while, and I've been able to enter and embrace their subjectivity, and the other one comes in. Talk about reality. It's just mind-blowing. And to the point where I absolutely don't believe I can know the person without knowing the relationship, but I also can't know the relationship without meeting the people alone. And I do both all the time. And I don't see it sequentially, I see it completely dialectically. I don't think you can know yourself outside of your relationship with others. But I also think that in relationship to others, many people cease to know themselves. I have yet to see a person or a couple come in and they say, I came to look at what I'm doing to make the situation between us bad. They all come to fix the other. And they're experts on the other and blind on themselves.
Said, Esther, about how this focus on individualism is an American perspective, and how I'm sure that was salient for you coming from a different country. I just traveled to India for the first time. How many people have been to India before? It is a I was just blown away by being in a culture where there's just a totally different operating system than the Western and Judeo-Christian kind of worldview that most of us have been brought up in. And I was there for a business conference, and I was blown away talking to business people having conversations about reincarnation with, thank you. Yeah, there's something with this, where I'm sitting, I'm not quite sure what's been going on with the mic here, I'm sorry about that. Okay, I'll switch, thank you. And so here are people who aren't necessarily kind of far out for their culture. These are people who are involved in business and commerce, who have just a totally different conception about themselves. And they, in their view, they've been here many, many times, and there's more of a cyclical sense. And that just completely changed my view of how certain I was of things. Not necessarily that I was going to go over to that belief system, but I saw how particular this narrative of the heroic individual that I kind of promote in my books, it's a very Western and American idea, and I found it very enriching to see that, see the tension between a culture where that's just not taken for granted.
You know, this was just a perfect example now too. This could have been the opposite of the heroic, right? You sat here, you had problems with the mic. We could have begun to say it's about how you hold the mic, it's about your voice, it's about your history, it's about your childhood. But no, it was about the place in the room. And once you change situation and environment and circumstance, the whole personal attribution theory falls in the water. So.
But somehow your mic's working.
I think I'm just not good at mic. I learned to take.
It's because I've traveled my whole life.
So,
Yes.
So I have a question. Esther, you mentioned essentially the imperative of the caveman having to procreate and essentially hold a farm and produce. Today's imperatives are much lesser. We can order food. We don't have to be the hunter-gatherers. So our instincts of procreation and territorial instincts are much easier to provide for most of the Western culture. And so we have much more time for ludic instincts, which is playfulness. So playfulness comes into our life a little bit more prominently. What do you see as the future or even present of committed relationship, committed sexual relationship, and it ties into secrets and maybe business. But how do you view the lifespan of committed relationships nowadays?
okay, so just to sum up, the let's say that the contours and the lifespan of committed relationships of all kinds. So, and that could also be your relationship to self and work, your relationship to your partner, committed sexual relationships. So,
I don't think of lifespan as much as lifestyle. In other words, our committed relationship really able to be truthful? And how many of us within this room can check within and say, well, I have not been really faithful, but I'm going to say I am. And what is the place of truthfulness today in committed relationship? Is there such a thing? In other words, not just the lifespan, how long can I stay with one human being, but can I really stay with a human being any lifestyle, any span of time? Should I not choose polyamory, or should I choose other alternative lifestyles in order to be truthful to myself and to the other?
nature of commitment, go.
So I am writing a new book. It's called The State of Affairs, Cheating in the Age of Transparency. So I am looking at the world for the last 6 months through the lens of infidelity, monogamy, polyamory. I'm swimming in it, and that's not a good time to talk about it because it's not synthesized yet. But I'm thinking about something that Michael was saying, which is that change is the new constant. Yeah, every 2 years you change company, and if you stayed a year and a half and you stayed another year, you're already stale. And it's like, never has that been as intense, and never has agency been as intense. And those two things are completely mirroring what is going on in committed relationships. For committed relationships to survive, which they will have to also embrace adaptability and flexibility. What is interesting to your question about the truthfulness to the self versus to the commitment to the system, and the battle between, not battle maybe, but the tension between commitment and freedom, between loyalty and self-fulfillment, and all of those things, is that we have done a much more rich development when it comes to family. We have multiple new family models and family configurations. We have single-parent families, gay families, adopted families, blended families, commuter families, no-children families, you name it. When it comes to coupledom, we are remaining remarkably monolithic. We really still believe in one model and one size fits all. And when the people don't succeed with the model, we never question the model. We just think the people don't do it well, and they have a history that doesn't allow them to do it well, and all of that. And basically, I chose the wrong person, and I'll do better next time. But the model goes untouched. And we are gradually arriving to a place where the model is the questioning of the model must become the next frontier, because it cannot be that millions of people are pathological. You know, and that they have attachment injuries, and that they have borderline personalities, and that they have a narcissistic, and all of the psychologizing of the problem doesn't do it, which is a way with which the institution tries to continue to maintain itself in spite of. We will always need to connect. We will always need a safe haven. We will always need a place where we can raise children with predictability and stability and security. How it will look will become very interesting. And unfortunately, the nuclear family has taken this, the nuclear family that wants romanticism together with stability, together with all of that, is leaving a lot of dead bodies in its trail. 50% in first marriages, but 65% in second. And if you only knew how many are unfaithful in the process, you know, it's like you really wonder where is the supposed truth and monogamy, and who actually is doing this? You know, where are those people? You know, but the institution never tells the story like that. It needs to tell the story from the perspective of a few bad seeds that have infiltrated a sound arrangement, rather than the questioning of the arrangement, because maybe the demands of our lives today are slightly different. Marriage has evolved throughout. It never was a static institution. Monogamy forever was one person for life. Today it's one person at a time. That is a profound redefinition of the concept of monogamy, you know, and we can go on and on like this. So we tend to think it used to be and now it is. No, this thing has changed forever. You know, the Bible is the only commandment that is repeated twice, is this one. Once for doing it, once just for thinking about it. Somebody understood human nature very well among the rabbis.
That's a great answer. I would only add to it, to say, the institution of marriage was created as a business arrangement.
Totally.
To, you know, pass to your progeny your lands and your wealth. And today, still, if you get a divorce, you probably lose at least 60% of your income. And, you know, so both households then suffer, children suffer. We know of all the ramifications for, you know, mental health, physical health, and economic health for all people involved when the division happens. And I also think that if you look back at the history of marriage since the beginning, there have been periods where marriage looked bleak, and maybe, and in different cultures where marriage didn't seem to work, or it seemed like, why are we doing this? And so I know that many people are saying, we're really at a crossroads, we're really going to have to investigate whether this is an institution that makes sense anymore. But I think if you look back over the history, different groups have been at that crossroads before, and yet this institution remains. So I'm not saying I know the answer, I'm just saying I'm not so sure we're at a crossroads. I'm not so sure, I mean, sometimes it's not a perfect system. There are definitely problems, and if the fact that you can't do it perfectly because we are inside who we are the animals that we are, and we have our desires, does that mean that we will decide collectively to throw the baby out with the bathwater? I don't think so.
But you agree that we could have more than one model?
Oh, I think we do have more than one model, and I think it definitely won't be one size fits all, and that's a good thing. But you know, if you look at cohabitation, more cohabitating couples are more likely to split up. Is that the solution? I think.
But is the measure of success the funeral home? I mean, is it durability and sustainability that we always measure for success, or do we look at quality? Maybe they can be good and shorter, rather than just long for the sake of being long.
Well, part of the answer has to include whether you decided to have children.
They'll be gone by then.
They'll be gone by then? Well, so...
I mean,
okay, I think a lot of people leave before the children are
That is
gone,
true,
and that's the
that's
problem. So, you know, there are like infinite answers. This is the issue. What kind of family are you? You know, are you a couple where no one else is having collateral damage? You decide, you know what, this relationship is done. We're both happy to move on. We're both happy to have quality somewhere else. Is a very different scenario than, we've got a couple of children who will be impacted in certain ways by what we do. There are just too many different kinds of desires, constellations, progeny, etc., to have a one-size-fits-all answer, I think.
Michael, I want to thank you because you've helped create a model for something that I think the rabbis of the Talmud never imagined, which is that all of the women would be talking and the man would be sitting silent, surrounded by women.
My wife is my best teacher.
Excellent.
So yeah.
However, what I would like is I would love to give you the last word in our conversation. No pressure, but probably the best thing is to say you're all right. But
you're all right. Well, I'll bring this conversation into the realm of career. The one relationship that we're all going to have, we know for sure, whether you're married or not married or divorced or religious or atheist, we're going to be in relationship with ourselves for as long as we're here. And so your question was about truth in relationships. And that is a question people have to grapple with very much, is how much is this way of earning a living true for me? That the model where you talked, Esther, about how we want so much more out of our marriages now that we're kind of fitting everything into the marriages. The same is true about our careers. We want more fulfillment. It's not just a paycheck anymore. How true is this way of earning a living? And what I've found from a lot of observation and experience is that typically the types of careers that feel more meaningful have to be created. And that doesn't necessarily mean that one has to be an entrepreneur and start a company, but there's this concept of intrapreneurship, where if you're just, any job now that is simply following orders is pretty much either being shipped offshore to India, which I just talked about, or being given to computers or even robots now, anything that's algorithmic that doesn't have that creative spark, and computers may become creative in the future, or probably will sooner than we think, but right now they're not. And so the one competitive advantage that we have, and the competitive advantage we have over offshoring and outsourcing, is creativity. And that actually syncs up very nicely with meaning, because that tends to be in our career lives what feels most meaningful is when we've made some mark. If you're just following orders, if you're just doing what someone else tells you, it doesn't really feel like you've made any difference, because someone else could have done that probably just as well. It's when you're creating something that you know that you've made a mark that wouldn't have been there without you. And so what I'm saying is you can actually be creative, not just in your job, but about your job, and finding the problems that exist in your organization or your business, and in a sense create a job for yourself that wasn't a job description. Even if you're not going to be an entrepreneur, every organization has all kinds of problems that aren't being solved, and that's how it can feel meaningful, is when you start reaching in yourself to find solutions that aren't being offered yet, and bring that creativity in all realms of your career.
Well, obviously, there's so much for us to discuss, and we've only barely begun to explore these questions, and yet that's exactly where we should be ending, because this is a lifetime pursuit. Creating our lives should last every single day of our lives. And we'll just close. Well, see, I'm a rabbi, so I told you you'd have the last word, and I'm taking it. So
you take it.
What can I do? There's a Hasidic teaching that when there's a man by the name of Zusya, and Zusya is really having a lot of anxiety. He might have ended up in one of your offices if he were alive today. And his anxiety was over the fact that he couldn't be like his father. He couldn't be like Moses. And we spend a lot of time wondering why we can't be like somebody else. And yet what Zusya is told by his rabbi is that at the end of your life, when you meet your maker, that this infinite being that fashioned you will not say, "Why were you not Moses?" That instead, he will be asked, "Why were you not Zusya?" And so in the quiet of this Shabbat, with our supersized soul, or our extra soul, hopefully the blessing of the peace and the reflection of this Shabbat, and what we can take from this learning, which is what this really was, a learning, is to be able to ask ourselves, why not be you? Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Esther and Gail and Michael. Thank you for being here tonight. Shabbat Shalom.